Should we get started? Hi, welcome everyone. We're gonna, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, so we've got some people trickling in. It looks like our participants were coming past 20, 30, so we'll just give everyone a couple of minutes to log on, and then I'll let you two take it away.
Okay, so I'll wait until 4:05. Would that be fair? Hi, if you're logging in, we're going to be waiting until 4:05 because people are still logging in, and to give them a chance to be with us. And while we wait, you might notice some features in the Zoom platform that you will be using later on. There is, on the bottom of your screen, if you can locate the question and answer, the Q&A, we will be taking questions through the Q&A as time goes on. You can vote on your favorite questions so that we will prioritize those. The presentation is going to have two parts. Towards the end, we will then start answering those Q&A questions. It may be that during the presentation, you're going to get some of those questions answered, but be patient. Perhaps towards the end, we'll be getting to them. We will try to get to as many questions as possible. We hope to be able to answer all of your questions. Frankly, we will have some times when we won't be able to answer the question because we just won't have that information. Everything is changing so quickly these days. That information that is accurate today may be different tomorrow. So we will also try to flag that for you. So let's get started. Oh, still have a couple more minutes. So let's, I'm getting the go ahead, so we're gonna get started now. Great, so first of all, this is the first time that we do this Remote Learning 101, Critical Resources and Supports for Families during this COVID-19 crisis. We will be having more presentations in the near future. We are planning on having a presentation, at least one in Spanish, although more are absolutely possible. Because this is the first time we do this presentation, be gentle with us. There are some glitches that we will have to fix, technical and otherwise. We are also conducting, as all of us are, from our homes. So we also anticipate some little, perhaps unexpected and unforeseen distractions, and we apologize for that. In the presentation, which we will email you afterwards, there are embedded links to more information and resources. We wanted to give you embedded links rather than to give you text and information because information is changing so much. We wanted you to go to the source of that information. And these sites that we will be working with are updating information continuously. So hopefully you'll get better information that way. Okay, let's get started. Oops. Today's agenda. So first, I wanted to introduce my co-presenter, Kim Madden. Kim, do you want to say something about yourself? Hello?
Yeah, hi, I'm Kim Madden. I'm the Director of Family Support at Advocates for Children. And we felt that we really needed to put this training out there, even though, to be honest, we're telling you what we know as far as we know right now. I think this is probably not news to all of you. It's why you signed in, but this information is changing rapidly. So we were editing our slides. We have a PowerPoint that we'll go through and that will be recorded, but we're editing it constantly. We're recording this and we are gonna hopefully do some more as well. So if you have other topics or there's parts of this that you're like, that was really helpful and I would like to know more on it, please let us know. We just want to get information out there because we know this is a tough time for everyone to navigate.
That's right. And my name is Liliana Diaz-Pedrosa, and I direct the Parent Center at Advocates for Children. I'll be telling you a little bit more about Advocates for Children right after we continue with the agenda today. So today we were going to talk about some basic matters that you may have already heard before, so it might be a little bit repetitive for some. There may be some pieces that are new to you. We certainly will be going into as much information as we can. So if you have heard the information, bear with us because we want to make sure that we are as comprehensive as we can during this brief period of time. So we are going to be covering free meals, regional enrichment centers, other help. Then we're going to go through technology and then the beefy part of it, which is remote instruction, what you can ask for, students with disabilities, language access, and then we get to your questions. All right, for those of you who are not familiar with Advocates for Children, we're an independent agency that protects the educational rights of all New York City students. And among the services that we offer, which is everything around education in New York City, we offer a free helpline that runs Monday through Thursday from 10 in the morning until 4 in the afternoon. We have tons of guides and resources, often in multiple languages, through our website. And that is the first of our live link. Every time you see something that is blue and underlined, that is a live link, and you will get this PowerPoint later on so that you can click on that link and connect to the site immediately. We offer free workshops, our trainings. In normal times, we would be going out into the community right now and be speaking with you face to face. Right now, we're doing a lot of e-workshops and e-trainings, and you certainly can reach back to us if you're interested in the typical topics that we would normally talk about to be provided in an online platform. And free legal services.
Sorry to interrupt, Leon, but just in case, everybody should be seeing a PowerPoint that we're clicking through right now. I actually had to click on something on my device. So if you don't see a PowerPoint, write it in the chat and we'll try to figure it out. Or the question and answer.
Good point. So far, it seems like it's okay. All right, so we are open. We are virtually open. We're not physically open. And please email us, contact us with any question, any concern. If you just want to report what you're seeing, or if you have any doubts as to what you've been told, reach out to us. We are more than happy to answer any question and any all question that you may have. We have tons of updates on our website. That link takes you straight to the COVID-19 resource page, which is being updated daily. It is a comprehensive and wonderful resource, not only for education-related information, but other very relevant information about the current crisis that we're experiencing. So first, just very general resources. We wanted to share these two websites, Help Now New York and Thrive New York City. Both of them offer general resources around food assistance, financial information, rent information, health and medical information. Thrive NYC in particular has a heavier slant on mental health and emotional support. These are two places that we felt were important enough to share and good repositories of information for just a general number of pieces. Now, some of you may have heard about the regional enrichment centers, which are safe places where essential workers and others can take their children for full-time care and instruction. They're open from 7:30 in the morning until 6 in the afternoon. They provide early childhood care for younger children, and also for children who are school age from K to 12. They offer remote instruction, all 3 meals, in small group to keep students safe. They're run by the Department of Education. Who is considered an essential worker? Healthcare workers, grocery workers, pharmacy, food services, transit, first responders. And they are considering also opening it up for children who are currently in temporary housing. The addresses are relatively secret. In order to be able to find out where you may be able to enroll in a rec center, in a regional enrichment center, you must fill out the enrollment form, and then the Department of Education will contact you to give you more information as to where to go and to verify the information that you're providing. The enrollment form is in this blue, hopefully you can see that, this blue link, and you can obviously Google it and find out about it. You can ask us about it later. The Department of Education is also offering free meals for all New Yorkers, not just for students or children, but free grab-and-go meals for all New York City residents, Monday through Friday, breakfast, lunch, and dinner, no registration needed. You don't all have to go. You can send one family member to pick up meals for all the family, all at once at the designated meal hubs for your neighborhood. To find out what your meal hub is, you can follow the live link on this page, or you can text meals or comida to 877-877. There are specific timeframes for families to come and pick up meals. So if you're a member of a family that has a school-age child, K through 12 or younger, you may go and pick up your meals earlier in the day from 7:30 to 11:30. If you're a family with adults only, from 11:30 to 1:30 p.m. There are vegetarian and halal options available. And when you go, you just go ask for the meals and you can then go home. There is no need to do anything else. I'll start this part and I think Kim will take it away halfway through. So technology. The Department of Education has iPads with data plans on loan for every single New York City public school student and charter school student and private school student who requires it. These are still being distributed. To obtain one, you should fill out the online survey, which is also linked here, or call 718-935-5100. There are also forms available at the Department of Education grab and go meal hubs. Originally, the Department of Education was prioritizing certain students to receive these iPads based on disability, English as a new language learner status, or students who were in shelters or temporary housing. But right now there has been an underwhelming number of requests for technology. So if you're interested in this technology, you have not requested it, please fill out the form. If you filled out the form a while ago and you have not heard back, please fill it out again. There's a lag in the distribution aspect of it, and perhaps the form was not properly processed. But please apply if you need that, if you need the iPad, or if you're having other technological needs, as this is the way in which your child is going to be able to access their school services. Do you want to add anything to that, Kim?
Yeah, the only other piece I would say is on our helpline and through our website, through our cases at Advocates for Children, this unfortunately is the #1 issue that we are still seeing, where people have had issues getting connected to getting devices. And so even though I think that you should definitely apply if you think you need one, also the other piece is we've heard a lot of families calling in and saying they've been told by their school there's one device per family. That's not true. The DOE is definitely saying it's one device per child, which is really important because especially if most remote learning is going on at the same time. So if you have a 2nd grader and a 5th grader, they need their own devices that it's hard to share. So you should definitely apply. But the other thing is, although I think the DOE is saying that they have, I don't remember the exact number, like 300,000 devices, far fewer have actually been distributed. So they're having a hard time with some of the distribution. So you should definitely apply and follow up if there's delays. In fact, I think the one message that we are going to keep saying throughout all of this is the time to speak up and ask for help. If something isn't working, definitely reach out to your school if you can, if you have any contact there, call 311 and just reach out. So for technology help, because it's a lot for many of us to learn all these different platforms. You definitely can reach out to the school. There's an email that's here, remote learning. There's a DOE help desk. You can call 311. And Apple actually has an iPad help center. This is not to get a device, but if you have a device and you're having trouble setting it up, that's the place to reach out to as well.
All right, your turn.
Oh yeah, you have to click though.
I do?
Oh yeah.
Oh no, sorry.
That's okay.
The bottom part.
Oh yeah, we did that.
Oh, we did. All right, great. Sorry. There we go.
That's okay. So remote instruction, that's this is what's going on right now. And this is something that we've heard, it's varying a lot. The DOE has left a lot of it up to individual schools and teachers to figure out. So some schools were giving primarily paper packets. Some were printing out or sending emails with stuff to be printed out. Other schools are doing online work through something like Google Classroom. Some schools are doing live instruction. And I think more schools are doing live check-ins. So they'll have classwork assigned, but then a few times a week, they'll have a teacher who's available to check in. This is something that we're definitely trying to get more information about, what's working, what's not. There's a range. So some parents are saying, we're hearing from people who are feeling very overwhelmed. And it's sometimes, students who need more individualized help, parents who are juggling incredibly intense things right now, and that's okay to speak up about. It doesn't have to just be, you know, in your usual life, you might just go to your child's teacher about, you know, they're struggling with reading something or it's taking a while. It's an okay time to say, look, you know, people in my family are sick. People are working still. This is too much. And it's definitely a time to speak out and ask for help. The learning standards, one question we've had is, well, why are they doing it this way? And I want it done that way. You know, some people are saying they're getting too little instruction, or they want live instruction and they're not getting anything live, or the reverse, they can't make the live and they want stuff that's more recorded. Whatever it is, you know, that's something to ask about. And if you're interested in reading, these are more detailed and kind of technical things, but the links that are here for city, state, and federal, these are the current guidelines. These are changing, but basically what is expected. And so I think that can be a place to look at if you're advocating for something different. Okay.
Hold on, I'm moving.
So,
Oops.
you missed one.
Yeah.
Okay, so how students and schools connect. This is the piece that for many of us, Liliana and I, in addition to working at Advocates for Children, are both also parents of school-age children. So we feel it in terms of juggling all of this. Personally, I'm totally frustrated by them scrapping Zoom this week. If you haven't heard, if you were using Zoom with your child's school, the DOE has now issued a directive that Zoom is secure for security reasons, is not something they want to use. So they've set up, they're saying you can use something called Google Hangout or Chat. And you know, I will weave in my own experience throughout this a little bit, but that we had trouble with that with the iPad that my son has. Microsoft Teams, I'm hoping will work. He did not have, no student really had a schools.nyc.gov email. But on that link that's here, that blue hyperlink at the end of create a student account here, I was able to actually create a link for him or create an account for him pretty easily. So we haven't used it yet, but that could be great if there's some more centralized support and uniformity. I think it will help people navigate this because it's a lot to sort out. But that's something to look at and, you know, see. Your school is supposed to be sending it to you, but I wanted to look at it as well. The technical tools and support link on the bottom has information about how to access Google Classroom. I am kind of in the middle of the road with technology, not great, not horrible, but I was completely perplexed by Google Classroom at first. And I think part of that was I don't think his school was using it as uniformly. I think the school has started to become they've started using it more uniformly. But I think that's something that it's a lot for us all to sort through. Okay. So some other questions that have come up.
Do you want me the next slide, or do you want to go over the questions?
Yeah, the next slide. Okay. So general, we're going to do questions, I think, at the end. Sorry, I'm not seeing them pop up right now. So, or I can look if there's some.
There is one about the help desk. So somebody asked about about an issue unlocking their laptop. The best way is really to contact the help desk to help you set up your iPad and unlock it. At the school, it's very unlikely that they're going to have technical support. So the best bet is going to be to go to your help desk and
call the help desk or Apple. I mean, for unlocking it, that's something Apple might work with. So I would try a few of those. The first week, we were hearing people having a really hard time getting through the help desk, which also is available in different languages. And by the way, we're doing this training as our first at the gate training in English, but we will be offering it again in Spanish, and hopefully offering other trainings as well. So going to some of the general issues people have asked about, and these, I'm really just telling you what we've heard so far. People have asked about promotion. Our understanding is it's going to be based on roughly the same thing that it was before: schoolwork for grades 3 through 8 and credits for 9 through 12. And for the next one, Leanna, can you click for grades? Flexibility, there's going to be flexibility, and it's going to have to be based on access to remote services. Obviously, this is a time when, you know, the huge differences between families across the city are going to become even more apparent. It's going to be really hard for many parents and families to access the materials and to work through this. And that's even apart from people dealing with having sick family members and all the crisis that we're in together. So I think that there is a recognition. They want to keep the expectation of work there so that students are still engaged and learning and making progress. But our understanding is there's going to have to be some kind of major flexibility with grading during this time. And the point is to keep students connected and supported. I have to say, as a working parent who was trying to work and do this myself the first week with a child with a really significant disability, I was totally overwhelmed. But one of the messages that my son's school kept saying is, this is about doing what you can. Don't hold yourself to the same standards. And to be honest, I was amazed at how comforting it was for my son to see his teachers and his peers. You know, maybe not as much as he would like, but he is getting connected with people, and those connections really help. So I hope you're having that experience as well when you do get connected, and to check in. Attendance is a big one too, you know, in terms of how are they marking it. Some schools are using Google Classroom. You have to check in. And another big question that is true for attendance, and also the next box, Leon, if you want to go to that, is about state testing. We're getting, you know, in New York City, in the system that we have that's, you know, completely bonkers for applying for middle and high school. Parents are understandably really worried about attendance usually counts and grades usually count. What now? So if your child's in 4th or 7th grade, but we can say as the DOE has recognized that this is not the time to hold everybody to the same old standards. They're going to have to change it. We don't know what they'll do yet, but we have heard that this time period is not going to count against you. And in fact, we're seeing that with the regents. They just released guidance yesterday or the day before on regents, where there will be no regents held for this year. And if your child was slated to take a regents, it'll be like they just passed it. If they're passing the course, they have to pass the course, but if they pass the course, they will pass the regents for their transcript. So I think that's a relief for people who are wondering, how is that going to work?
I wanted to interrupt you just 1 second to let everybody know that we are answering questions through the Q&A feature in Zoom. So please take a look and also vote for the questions that have not been answered to see which ones are of more importance to you. All right.
Yeah, and we're trying to get through this material pretty, you know, we have about an hour. If we don't get to all the questions, we promise we will try to work them into future trainings. If you have individual questions that are more detailed about what's going on for your own child's school, definitely I would encourage you to call our helpline or email in, and we'll try to help you with that as well. Okay, so students with disabilities. This is obviously a tough time for everybody and incredibly hard for students with disabilities who in school often have a whole team of people that support them. So IEP meetings, people are wondering, well, what happens now with an IEP? We actually have heard of a number of IEP meetings still going forward. They're being held by phone. So everybody's on the phone, obviously, and you know, they should be held. There's nothing exempting schools from holding IEP meetings. But one thing we've heard is a number of parents having people from their school request that they write in and say they don't want the IEP to go forward. That's something that obviously if you don't want the IEP to go forward, you can always do that. But for these parents who had called us, they did want the IEP to go forward. They had no idea what it would feel like or how it would work or what they're asking for in this time. But if you think your child needs help or there's an annual review or a triennial review, don't waive it unless it is something you want to do for yourself. I know it's going to be different, but it's not something that you want to agree to waive. Evaluations can be tricky. So most psychological and educational evaluations have to be done in person, but there's other evaluations, classroom observations, just teacher reports, social history things. There are things that can be done remotely, and at least right now what we're suggesting families do is hold the meeting with the information you have, ask for the help that you think is needed now, and if something needs to change later, then you can do that later, but still go forward with it. The big piece that's happening right now is remote learning plans. So we are going to spend the next few slides after this talking about them in a little bit more detail. This is something that is still in the works. I sort of was thinking of it like a mini IEP for this time. I think the DOE is trying to discourage that description because it is different than an IEP. But it's a document that's supposed to describe what a student is getting remotely now to meet their needs as laid out in the IEP. So it's not a one-to-one thing, but it's something, you know, that describes what's happening. So we'll give you an example of that. It is one where I think the biggest part that Advocates for Children is concerned about is currently there doesn't seem to be an organized way for parents to have input into it. So I think it ends up being school by school. Some teachers and providers are really checking in with families. Other families are being told this is what there is, you can consent to it or not. And so we think it's really important to raise concerns about it. For example, we had one parent call in and say that her child's physical therapist was, instead of doing any kind of one-on-one instruction, was sending YouTube links to YouTube videos and saying they would check back in and you should do these exercises. And the parent felt like, that's not going to work. I need something more intensive than that. And when she talked to the PT said, that's fine, but then that means you're not consenting. And the parent went to the school to ask for more help, and the school actually reconvened with the PT and tried to figure it out. Now, I don't know what was going on with that PT. They may have been struggling with a lot personally, but there are other resources within the Department of Education. And so it's an example where the last we heard, the parent was told there would be another phone conversation this week with the school. I don't know if it's been resolved, but they were taking that concern seriously. So speak up. And everybody, this is new for all of us. So it's a time, you know, to ask questions. Timelines. Okay, so this is something that I personally am finding incredibly frustrating, that on a state level and on a federal level, there is an effort to change the timelines for this period. So the state regents this week passed something, emergency regulations, changing the date for implementing an IEP. So to step back, there's a lot of dates with compliance. One of the big ones that's a New York reg, not a federal regulation, is that from the date of consent or the date a parent refers their child for reevaluation, you know, asks for more help, the DOE has 60 school days to do any evaluations, hold an IEP meeting, and offer the program and services in the IEP. That's 60 school days. That's a pretty common timeline that people tend to know throughout the city. That's the one that they basically have said is waived for now. And that school days is defined as days that the actual building, the brick and mortar, is opened, which is closed right now. The problem with that is school is not closed right now. So it's something where, and the state is not saying no IEP meetings, you don't have to do anything during this period. I think what the most generous thing I could say is that they're saying we need more flexibility. So if you're a parent who's caught in this, where it hasn't been 60 school days since you put in a consent or a referral, and they're delaying, you should just keep writing, because they're still under the federal within a reasonable time period. You know, that's the regulations from the US Department of Education. So it is important to keep asking. That this is the kind of thing that I think will change. We have heard there is an effort to change the federal laws as well to give states more flexibility that we're concerned about. But we don't have more information on that at this time. We did hear from a parent who was told, you know, we're going to put off the IEP, but it has already been over 60 school days since she put in for the request. So it was, I think, in early January. And that's a parent who absolutely, even the state changing these emergency regulations, they are still out of their timelines. And so we were encouraging her to ask for the IEP meeting to still go forward. Okay, so this is, I know this is tiny, but this is just a screenshot of what the one-page remote learning plan looks like right now. This could change. And so then the next one is a close-up of it so you can see a little bit more about what it says.
You'll
Can
try.
you click on the next one?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it's just a next, yeah. So this has student information. It has, you know, the English language learner status on top, whether or not they need help. And then in addition to, you know, what do they usually have, it says, do you have this technology at home? So this is actually, you know, an example of something that they're trying to work out. So you should have that stuff at home. If you don't, this would be a time to raise that. Okay, so the next one is really the main part of it, the program part of it. And as you're looking at this, it might remind you of an IEP, but when you look at what's in there, that is not like any IEP you've seen before. It's one-to-one video conferencing. So for this student, this is SETS, and speech therapy, and ICT office hours. So that's not ICT classes. That means that there's ICT being, you know, office hours where teachers are available. And there's Google Classroom. So that's the, you know, the services that are here. This is going to look really different for every student, but for your student, what you want to do, if you haven't gotten one of these yet, is ask, but you have had somebody reach out about what they're doing. Hopefully, if you have a device and you've been getting something, I mean, it is the third week technically. So if you're getting something and you have not gotten a copy of the remote learning plan, speak to whoever you're communicating with at the school, find out who is supposed to be coordinating that for you. For my own son, that was something where it was sort of bouncing back and forth between people till we figured out, okay, who's owning this, and raise concerns. So if you're looking at this and it's not what you're getting, that's something to raise. If it is what you're getting, but you're like, you know what, this isn't enough, or this is too much. Too much is certainly something that you can say. So if your child gets a lot of services and everybody wants to do everything, it could be overwhelming. So it is okay to base this on what your personal capacity is. And that's something that I think throughout this, we want to say for families struggling with this. Remote learning puts a huge burden on the parents, especially for kids that aren't working independently. And many students with disabilities need, I mean, they need a lot of extra help. That's why they have an IEP. And so if it's something that it's beyond what you can do, or you need extra help understanding it, you know, trying to help my son with his math homework is really challenging for me. So we had to figure out a different way to do it. For me, I got his dad to help him because it's less challenging for him. But I think it's something that, you know, for people, it's okay to say this is too much. Or too little. Speak up and make sure that you're responding. Even though there is not a place for parent concerns at this point to be reflected on this, we hope they'll add it. You should reply in writing, is always safer, but reply, you know, quickly and say what is working and what isn't working, and that could change.
Kim, there's a question that came in just on that. It says, does the parent of a student with a current IEP need to specifically request a remote learning plan? And if
that is
yes,
such a good question.
So
No, this is something that should be being done for everybody. The deadline had been last week, then it got extended. I heard, but have not read officially, that the deadline was today. From what we've seen at Advocates for Children, very, very few people have gotten a remote learning plan. This is something that's entered into CSIS, the Department of Education computerized data system, to try to track everything related to special education. So this is supposed to be entered in there. It's something that if you are getting some kind of remote learning from your child's school and your child has an IEP, reach out and say, what is the learning plan? I need a copy of that. And they should send you, they can do a screenshot. I know the DOE has issued guidance on how to get this to families, printing a PDF and emailing it to them, texting a family a screenshot to their phone. It is kind of tiny. You have to zoom it out to see it there. But you should definitely get these. I know it's not the complete equivalent of an IEP, but this is something that's describing their idea for comparable services for your child right now. And it's really important to keep track of that. If you're not getting this, or if you're not getting something and you think that it's important for your child to get it, one thing that, this is advice I give better than I follow, but it is really important to keep track of it somehow, because someday this will end and we'll go back to school. But for some of us, our kids are going to be pretty far behind, and there's going to be a lot to figure out what needs to get made up. And it will be important for you to be able to say then, this is what you've given to me, and this is what my child needed, or this is what you said you would give, but this is what I got. Whatever it is, this is the time for, I know I'm adding on another thing to already really overwhelmed parents and families, but if you can, try to keep track, however it works for you, of what you're getting. Okay, so related services and sets. This is something that is one-to-one sometimes, or in a group. The group can be tricky for people with scheduling, but it is something where we are hearing of people getting teletherapy. For my own son, for example, I was pretty cynical. He has a really significant physical disability, so I was thinking, how is that going to work? But I got to tell you, seeing his OT every morning has been amazing, and it has made him so happy, and she can get him to raise his arms and to do some oral motor stuff. And honestly, it's just the emotional connection is really important. And my son gets sets, and having that connection with the teacher has helped, because the Google Classroom work is not as differentiated or it's not differentiated. And so trying to have somebody help us sort through what is going to work for him and what won't is really, really helpful. I would say that on a positive note, if you have time to connect with your school, and that it does take a lot of time, it is a way to try to get to know people better than for those of us who are working parents normally. It's sometimes hard to figure it out. Assistive technology, obviously this is something that many students need throughout the school year, but when the entire classroom has suddenly become remote, it's more important than ever. The Center for Assistive Technology, the CAT teams at the DOE, are opened if you need extra help with something, because this remote learning platform is not working, and it's something to do with the technology and your child's disability, you can write in and ask for help. Okay. There are no in-person services. We're not really getting, when we first closed, the first week, we were getting questions from parents saying, can't we do this one-on-one? My provider is willing to come to my home. Now I think those questions have petered out as it's become pretty clear that the situation has shifted. But last week we were hearing that the DOE was going to offer one-to-one nurses to students that had that on their IEP. These are typically students with really pretty significant medical disabilities. I think many families in that situation do not want somebody else coming into their homes because of the danger. But if your family or a family you're advocating for falls in that, you should know that that is available. Okay. And missed services, I think I already covered this, but this is, I was saying the $1 million, but it might be a lot more than $1 million actually, dollar question of what happens to all the kids who fall behind. And for students with disabilities, you still have a right to a free and appropriate public education. And the federal government has not yet taken away the right to compensatory services. I think that's the one we're scared of happening, but students obviously need to be given something to catch up if they weren't able to keep up. We don't know the answer to that, but what we would say is think about how your child's doing and what you think they may need, and just keep track. And obviously, I know I've said this now, I'm a completely broken record, but speak up. This is not the time. And for me, I can understand it, because I have been amazed at the incredible effort and care that many, my son's teachers and providers have put into things. And I know that, we're grateful for people who are managing to work through this. But if something is not working, this is the time to speak up. And, trying to ask for help now is going to be really important.
Coming. Here we go.
Okay, so language access. So I was talking about students with disabilities. Now I'm talking about families that speak a language other than English. Translation and interpretation services have always been available to families, although they're not always provided as much as we would like. But at this time, it is really critically important that families understand what's going on. I would say in our helpline and on our website, way disproportionately to business as usual, the families we're talking to who are struggling the most are the ones who don't speak English, and they're getting forms that aren't translated. They're having a really hard time navigating the technology if they're getting it, and they're just struggling. So this is a time to ask for translation and interpretation of everything. Remote learning plans. So this is something that we have heard is supposed to be provided. I have yet to see one. But for students who are learning English, so they're now called multilingual learners, they have a right to have their needs met at home. And so if you were getting bilingual instruction, your Google Classroom should be bilingual. For students who have disabilities, who are multilingual learners, and who had something called an alternate placement para, which is they were in a class that was not bilingual special education, and they were assigned a para to help basically real-time interpret and translate materials for the student, they should still be getting the support of somebody to help with that. And then also parents who need support. So all the rights I was talking about with multilingual learners for students exist, but right now parents of students, there's many parents who don't speak English whose children do, and they're no longer a multilingual learner if they had been before, but the parents don't speak English. So their limited English proficiency is what it's called. And they really need help now because they're being asked to provide, basically to be teacher, PT, OT, para, everything for their child. And if all the instructional materials are coming in English, that parent is not going to be able to keep up. And so a parent who needs support should be asking the school for support. And this is something that we're going to be advocating for and pushing for the DOE to try to do whatever they can to help these parents navigate. Okay, this is you, I think.
Yeah. So wrapping up this part of the presentation, we wanted to give you some reminders. The first one, of course, if you need help, ask. This is really important. We're here to help. You will find support if you only reach out for it. Please do not hesitate to come out and request it. And then things change, check for updates. We have tons of links embedded. But also you can contact us through our helpline. You can write to us at info@advocatesforchildren. I also wanted to remind you of a couple of things that Kim had mentioned. And the first is that it's one iPad per child. It's really important to remember that piece, that is not one iPad per family. Imagine if you had, I don't know, a good number of kids in your house and all of them needed services. It would be unfair to have them all share one iPad when there's supposed to be one iPad per child. Please request the iPads. Please request the technology that you need so that your children can access the services. And finally, keep track of the services that are being provided to your child, because as Kim mentioned, this is going to end someday. And when it happens and we return to whatever version of normal there is going to be, we want to know that your child is going to be receiving the services they're owed. We have a survey that will pop up and come to you later on. It would be really helpful if you could fill it out for us. It's very short. And to give us your just your feedback on what we did today. Finally, we are sending out a weekly update, and to opt in for that update, please text us, text AFC alerts at 22828. We are now going to be taking questions from the Q&A.
Yeah, do we have ones that did people vote on them? How does this work? Let's see. I saw one that I wanted to take. There's a few that were about, my child is not getting, I know I was describing the live instruction that my son is getting and how grateful I am for it. And to be honest, he's getting some in some things and not in others. So I feel like a bunch of questions were kind of on this. My son gets a lot of support, related service support, and he gets some sets, and he also is in an ICT. So the question was, some questions were, I want something live, I'm not getting anything live. Somebody else said, well, what's reasonable in an ICT? And I think just to address those questions, first of all of it is very individual to each student. ICT, I think, is a tough one because what they're often doing is just putting materials in Google Classroom. But the special education teacher is supposed to also be helping with that. And I think one thing that is really reasonable to ask that you can see referenced in way back in the beginning, we had a thing on standards, that city and state and federal standards for remote instruction. If you look in there, they certainly are talking about a preference for some live check-in. So there's a continuum from people who are saying, oh my goodness, my child's school is asking my child to be in school for 5 hours a day. I can't handle that. You have to understand what it looks like in my house. To unfortunately, much more typically, we're hearing people saying they're just sending me some work and there's no support. I think that it is completely reasonable to say, can we have a live check-in through, it's going to have to be one of the new approved platforms right now, Google Hangouts or Microsoft Teams. But to ask for something that's a small group or even individual to say, I need to check in. I need more support, and to write in and ask for that. And I do think it's also okay to say my child needs some interaction. I mean, for my own son, the one-on-one stuff was fantastic, but to be honest, the part that he likes the most, and he can only do a few of them because there's some scheduling issues, which is, I guess, the downside to when you have a lot of stuff, but is seeing his classmates when everybody's asking questions of the teachers, but just to see them is really, really helpful. And I think that's probably true for many of us on here, that, you know, you start realizing how much your child does get from school and how much they miss that interaction. And I think it is completely reasonable to ask for that. You know, I think it's not a time when you're going to get one-to-one. You know, you're not going to get 5 ICT classes a week if that's what your child is getting in whatever subject it is, but you should be getting something. The other 2 questions that are related to this were what's happening for spring break. If I could tell you myself, I would love to, because I'm still trying to work it out and it starts tomorrow, right? Definitely the state message and the city message was spring break is canceled. Instruction should continue. Personally, what I've heard is we're not doing any instruction during spring break. We're going to be sending you some kind of activities, and there'll be some sort of replacement, you know, things. And I get that. I mean, it's a religious holiday, but personally, I'm really hoping they do something, because it's not like any of us are going off on great vacations right now. But it is something where I think that is going to be very school by school. I do think because the DOE is aware that many schools are cutting back on what they were providing, there may be other opportunities for, I think they're calling them enrichment activities or something, but for other things. I just heard today about, for those of us with older kids, the transition centers throughout the city are possibly going to be offering some live classes or webinars on transition, which could be great. And there are a lot, we didn't cover it in here because we wanted to just cover the basics, but on the DOE website and on one of the earlier links that Liliana sent around, there are a lot of resources now for things that parents who do have devices can access. So like PBS has tons of different things by grade. So if you are a parent who's looking for more work or more stimulation, that's something to look at. And the last question I'll take is, what is Betsy DeVos up to? I don't know, but I'm worried too.
All right, there's a couple of questions, so let me see if I can read a couple and knock them out. So it says, for a child who is at a private placement or receiving private ABA or speech through an individual provider, do they also have to use Team or Google Meet, or if they don't, they may not get reimbursed? I think for that one, that's, you know, whatever the independent provider is using. The restriction on Zoom is really for Department of Education generated services. They're
actually,
going to be
Liliana, I don't think that's right. Unfortunately, I think from what I've seen, they may be restricting the independent. I would tell, if it is a provider asking it, ask that question. I do think that they're giving a grace period. So I think if you're doing it right now, they're not going to cut you off. We were very frustrated by the lack of guidance for independent and contracted providers, because it ended up being a real delay for many students with providers who were willing and able to provide services while they were waiting for guidance. But given what I saw with that, I guess that's, you know, on a rational basis, I would agree with you, Liana, but I would be worried about saying that definitively at this time. Sorry.
I'm fine with that. No worries there. Always are on the side of caution, I guess.
Yeah.
Is translation provided for remote related special education services, such as related service provider only speaks English, but a family and student do not speak English? Technically, there should be interpretation provided so that the family can communicate with the related service provider. And if the student also has a bilingual paraprofessional or someone who is usually in that role, then interpretation should be provided so that they can participate. I mean, it makes perfect sense, but the answer there is yes, interpretation services should be provided to the family so that they can participate. Let's see. Are all children supposed to receive a remote learning plan, whether or not they receive services? Only children who have IEPs or Section 504 plans, shouldn't they get one too?
Yeah, and I haven't seen that yet, but I think they should. And
yeah.
Also English language learners, although we haven't seen that at all. I think for students who were not in those categories, for a general education student, it is reasonable to reach out and describe what you would like. You should definitely look at those standards that we have the hyperlinks for, and advocate for your child. And, you know, for example, compensatory education, typically that's a legal term of art that we typically use for students with disabilities because there's a legal right to it. If they haven't provided you with what's on your IEP, you know, you have a right to sue over that. A general education student who's being provided with a subpar education doesn't have that right. But at this point, given how tough this is, it's a time for advocating and asking for whatever your child is going to need to catch up, because we are so worried about the students who are in real crisis right now. And so I think it's a time to ask for what your child needs, let us know, describe the situation. I think there are many people at the DOE who are trying to figure out how to help kids after this shakes out, because they are so worried about it. We don't have answers except ask and keep track of it.
Another question, does the remote learning plan come in languages that are preferred by families? Well, families who do not, who have limited English proficiency should be getting information translated in their language. As we see more remote learning plans come out, I think the first issue is having them actually create the plan.
And one is mine.
And then step two, yes, I believe that there is an entitlement to that. I'm not entirely sure how that's going to play out or if that's going to happen automatically. Do charter schools are charter schools mandated to provide remote learning plans or something similar? Children who have IEPs and multi-language learners are entitled to these learning plans. So yes, they are required to provide that. Charter schools are public schools. So yes. There was a more complex one that I wanted to leave for a little bit more time. With an ICT designation but not pull-out services, what is reasonable to request? Currently, most classwork is independent and online, like videos, PowerPoint links, worksheets, and supplemented with, at best, weekly live check-ins. So what can you ask for? That's a good question.
I think that was the one that I was trying to say. I think if they're doing weekly live check-ins and that's not enough, maybe you want to ask for a small group with the special ed teacher. To go through things, or even a one-on-one with a special ed teacher, or to have modifications and accommodations made to the Google Classroom work, which I think is really reasonable, because if that work in the classroom would typically, think about what sort of support, and this is something that I totally get it as a parent, you may not know, and no judgment there, but if you think your child is normally getting more help from the special ed teacher, so that if the math assignment is 25 class questions and the special ed teacher is working with a child and saying, let's focus on these 15 that cover the same idea, but we're not going to get through all of them, we're going to take these slower. That's the kind of thing that you can say, hey, my child is not able to keep up with it. They don't understand what supports are there. How can we modify and accommodate this to make it work? That's a reasonable request. And if the office hours are just with the gen ed teacher, with the gen ed and special ed teacher, and it's not working, ask for something.
Now I have one that's really hard to answer. What happens if your school-age child is a senior and supposed to graduate this year? Are they still going?
To graduate, we don't know, but
we don't know.
It's
but to graduate?
But in terms of graduation, that was something that I found the Regents thing really exciting, to be honest, because that could have gone many ways. And my understanding, and I have not read it in incredible detail yet, but my understanding is the general idea is they are going to help kids graduate. So I was, talking with somebody today who said there may be from the DOE, who was saying there may be a higher graduation rate this year. Who knows? There may be a lower graduation rate this year because more kids are, we don't know. There's no way to predict that. But I do think if your concern is something that they would have done this year, like they had to pass the global regents and what's happening with it, or they're having trouble with credits. If your child is able to keep up in some way with the classwork, and there should be a lot of flexibility with it, and pass, then they should be able to graduate. If you're asking about graduation ceremonies and everything else, I don't know. And it is a tough year to be a senior.
Just a reminder that we have the Regents guidance information and the COVID frequently asked questions on our COVID page, which is on our website at advocatesforchildren.org. Just when you land on the website is probably the first thing you'll see. Click on it and you'll find more information. You can also email, call, just get in touch with us. We want to hear from you, and keep those questions coming. I think we're nearing the end of them though.
Yeah, the only other one I saw is somebody being worried. I think I was talking a lot about if you're worried that your child is going to be held back or not graduate and that they're giving flexibility. Somebody asked about their child on the spectrum who they're worried is just going to be promoted but will struggle. That's the kind of thing that I think is a really valid question. And then it's what kind of help would they need? We don't have the answers to this yet, but you know, it might be time to say, I'm really concerned about them losing X, Y, and Z skills. And is there something that you can do over the summer to help with it? Or can we add extra services? Or, you know, whatever it is. I think promotion is going to be a tricky one because many kids will be further behind other students next year, and not because they would have otherwise been, but because they didn't have the instruction.
All right, let's see. Do the REC offer supports to students that have IEPs? That's a tricky one. So the regional enrichment centers they're supposed to be more they're supposed to offer schoolwork, but they're more like childcare centers, places where they can keep their children safe. So yes, they're supposed to receive educational support and enrichments like art, etc. They're not geared towards providing special education services in a traditional sense. So
although the guidance is that they're supposed to, so I feel like that is, oh, sorry, Liliana.
No, go ahead.
I was like, no, go ahead.
No, I mean, technically, yes, they're supposed to, but what we are seeing is more that these are volunteers that are coming in. They're not necessarily certified in the area of special education or other areas of instruction. But although, yes, supposedly, it does not seem like this is happening at this point. I don't know if you want to add to that, Kim.
I mean, the only thing I would say is I think that the demand for the rec centers or regional enrichment centers, rec centers just seems like the wrong acronym, but is much lower than I think they thought it would be at first. And I think that it is totally fair to ask for something to explain the situation and ask what's there, because my understanding is they are supposed to have certified teachers. They have volunteers as well, but you know, I think that there may be people who have the right certifications if it's a place where there's, you know, not a huge demand or there's special ed teachers. I feel like if it works for you, it could be great. So certainly ask, and absolutely legally, and I think in terms of their policy, they do want to support all students, including students that would be in District 75, because it is obviously so important and critical for the essential workers and first responders to have help. If you're interested in that, reach out, ask for it. I think you could go ask to visit, to talk to somebody, or do something remote if that makes you, you know, whatever it is. But certainly legally you're entitled to it. Liliana, I don't think you're wrong in that it's kind of like after school is open for everybody, but people have had a harder time accessing it.
Yeah, and also remember, students with IEPs have a variety of needs. So some may have requirements for emotional, behavioral, academic, health, just a wide variety of support. So before a parent is feeling secure that a child is safe in an environment, these are questions that need to be answered. Are they going to receive the supports that they need to be safe and productive during a school day from 7:30 in the morning until 6 o'clock in the afternoon, which is a really long day. So yeah, I guess technically they should. But
yeah, and the piece with that too, though, I think they'll be flexible. So I think people can drop off and pick up, and it's not every day. So the idea is supposed to be more flexible. It's not like you sign up and you're 5 days a week, you know, whatever that is, 10 hours, I don't even know. It doesn't have to be that way. So definitely call and ask if you're interested.
Another question, are parents aware of these resources? I know that there have been issues reaching out to parents and students. They've been making a lot of very good efforts in trying to share this information, but there's always going to be pockets of parents that really need this information that are not getting it. It's part of the reason why we're doing this, and we would really urge you to share this, this information and communicate with folks who may not have free access to this. Because yes, there's some pockets of people that are not getting this and they really need the help. Any information about enforcing, I'm going to leave this one to you, Kim. Any information about enforcing if RSAs are able to be implemented via teletherapy? My son's PTOT, speech and TBI, have said that it's all on hold. How can we enforce RSAs?
Yeah.
I figured you would
I
like
would
that
love to.
one.
Yes, that is
Mhm.
a big one because I'm a little confused by that myself.
Me too.
So RSA provide, well, actually, I would step back. There's related service providers in schools, there's contracted providers, and then there's RSA providers. And we have heard different things with all of them. So the RSA providers, it took the longest time for the DOE to issue the guidance on it, which was unfortunate because, and I think some people did provide services in the absence of it and other people didn't. What we have heard now, and this is not related to just RSA providers, but we have heard that there are mixed messages going out to providers, and some providers who were providing teletherapy may not be now. I'm not sure if that's because of the break or because of other issues. It is an issue that we're tracking really closely. So please write into the website or call in through our helpline and provide us with as much information as you can, like what was being provided, what you've heard, if you have emails about it. Because obviously if a provider is willing and able to provide services and is, this is where I understand what Liliana was saying about Zoom. I love Zoom, but if the DOE is saying no Zoom, it's not safe, they may tell an RSA provider you have to use Teams or Google Hangouts or something. But I feel like as long as a provider can show that they're able to provide services in a safe way and it's verified and the family is consenting and is saying they're getting it, it's certainly something that we would want to make sure can happen and that there isn't a bureaucratic hurdle to it. If that makes sense.
Makes sense to me. One last question, and I think that will be it for today. It says, and it's kind of a hard one. Schools are saying they can't force the teachers to do live videos because it is not in their contract. They are a union and the UFT does not mandate them, the teachers, to do live virtual sessions. I'll start and you can finish. Schools are required to offer instruction at this point, but it is really left up to each school building to figure out how that instruction is going to be provided. That's really kind
I mean,
of
what
it.
I would say is there's nothing in their contracts about
Yeah.
COVID. I guarantee you. I am not a UFT negotiator. Oh, look, what do I know? Actually, I haven't read the contracts. I should take that back. But maybe there is pandemic language in there. I can tell you that the city and federal and state, I said that backwards, the city and state and federal guidance does seem to have a pretty strong preference for some live check-in. And I think it is reasonable to say that, you know, if it's possible, schools should be doing that. On the other hand, you know, I don't want to be a jerk, a teacher that's sick or that is juggling stuff, because teachers are also parents and are also juggling this. And I think it's a time for flexibility with everybody. I think the part that gets me frustrated is hearing it's not in my contract, I don't have to do it. If they're saying I can't do it, I need help, we need to figure out flexibility, that feels a little bit different to me. But I would say that there is, at least in the guidance, if you look at that, it does seem like there is, you know, an understandably strong preference for some live check-in, at least.
Yeah,
I wish it was stronger or clearer on what it could be, but I think that that's something that is important to figure out with flexibility, right? I mean, it is a tough time for everybody.
So I'll tell you what I'll add to that, and I'll finish from my end, Kim, of course. Add if you wish. What we've seen includes live videos from teachers or pre-recorded messages from teacher, even if it's just like a good morning, hello, today we're going to do this, as well as no live instruction and just communications through Google Classroom or communications through other methods. Just letting the students know what to expect. I mean, there's not one way of, one consistent way of services being provided at this point, even for live or recorded or interactive instruction. It is really school-based, but I have seen teachers do live videos. And I have seen also recorded videos and no live anything as well. So it varies. So I don't know about the truth of that statement, other than it's.
And from what I've read in the guidance, the only other thing I would add, Lee, I totally agree with that. I think the one thing that, at least from what I saw, and it could have changed since we put the link up, but is that there is a preference for something live. Like maybe you're not going to get an actual class because that's unfair to students that can't make it. they don't, that time doesn't work. They're dealing with, so there's lots of things that are going on. So I think there's fairness things there, but the idea of a check-in with a teacher that's live is certainly reasonable.
So I wanted to remind you of some final words, to call the helpline, email us, let us know what's happening. We are going to be sharing a link to the PowerPoint and a video of the event after the webinar ends. And please take the survey. It's going to pop up right as the webinar ends, and it will also be emailed to you. We really, truly appreciate your time and your listening to us. Please join us again when we do this one more time. All right, and good luck. Stay healthy.
Thank you.